Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Beattys on the Fly. Tonight we're tying flies in Lubbock, Texas at Kyle Jones Mountain Hideaway Fly Shop. What are we going to do? We're going to have a Wonder Wing adventure with Al Beatty. And who is Al Beatty? Well, I'm sorry to tell you that, but this old guy talking to you is Al Beatty. And joining me tonight is my lovely wife, Gretchen, who will be taking care of the studio technical um, needs and demands tonight while I tie flies. And what are we going to do? Well, there it is right there. It's a Wonder Wing. Like I said, we're going to have a Wonder Wing adventure. And then we will be tying a second fly. It's the parachute version of that. And the requirements for that parachute have got some pretty good lessons in there for the fly tyer. You'll use lessons from that all the way through your fly tying adventure as long as you tie flies. Anyway, let us take a look at the recipe. If you want to refer to the recipe again later, grab your cell phone and take a picture of the screen, or just holler. We're right here handy. But anyway, we're going to be using a dry fly hook. The thread, I got down choice because this fly is a design type fly. It's not a specific pattern that must be done a certain way with a certain color. So I put choice. However, I'll be using gray tonight. I think that's what I've got here. Yeah, gray. And hackle fiber tail. The rib is optional, and when I get to that point, I'll decide whether we're going to have a rib or not. The body is dubbing. The wing is a Wonder Wing. The hackle will be grizzly or whatever I have laying on my desk. And again, the head will be thread. Now let's take a look at those materials that are in the recipe for a moment by slipping over here. One of the things that we have to use in our neck of the woods, maybe in your neck of the woods too, is a thing called static guard. We're in the Rocky Mountain high desert country, and it's pretty dry around here, and static electricity is a reality all the time. So we sprayed everything down with static guard tonight before we started. Let me set that out of the way. I'll be using dry fly hooks, just like we talked about in the recipe a moment ago, size 12 tonight, but this can be tied in any size that you want. Now I'm going to pause and make a plug for a product of which I have absolutely nothing to do, except I'm a very happy customer. Let me go over here to the vise so you can get a better look at this particular product. It's called Thread Magic. And I don't know about all of you, but I've got an irrigation system in my yard, and there's always something going wrong with the irrigation system, it seems like. And whenever I work on the irrigation system, my hands get cracked. And it's just terrible when you're trying to dub with cracked fingers. Well, this Thread Magic heals all that instantly. Anyway, back over to the number 4 camera. There we go. Set that aside. I've already used that. The hackle I'm using, I've already sized it. It's grizzly, and I'll just set that over at the fly tying vise, so it'll be there handy when I'm ready to use it here in a few moments. And the feathers that we're going to use for the wing are off of a whiting cape, the big end of the cape, and I've already got a couple of them selected, so I'll set the cape aside, and I'll just set the feathers down here so I can get to them. We'll show you how to prepare them in a moment, because it's kind of important how we do that. The tailing is going to be from a whiting tailing pack. I'll just set that out of the way. And the feather is a shoulder feather from a Coq de Leon rooster. And the dubbing is a product that we manufacture, and it's called Soft Touch. You'll learn about touch dubbing tonight. And anyway, you'll learn about touch dubbing tonight. And basically, touch dubbing that we have here, if you've got muskrat, rabbit, mink, any of the natural critters like that, belly fur, it's a mix of shorter fibers. That's what you need for touch dubbing. Okay. As I said, this is the roadmap fly, and I'll get my other glasses on and we'll get started. And I'll just take that out of the vise. By the way, we'll look at it a little bit later, but that's the parachute version of the same thing. And we'll just set that down, put a hook in the vise. I get this question quite often. These hackle pliers have nothing to do except to hold the hook so I can pick it up at the last minute when I'm trying to do a demonstration. I find it really frustrating to try to pick up a hook when I'm demonstrating to somebody in Texas or wherever.
Why don't you talk about your O-ring there on your...
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I forgot about that. Several years ago, we wrote an article on tips and tricks. We do them all the time for Fly Tire Magazine. And I want you to notice the O-ring on my bobbin. And what I'm going to do now is show you that what we use that O-ring for is we pull it off when we're done tying. We slip it over the thread and secure it in place. I cannot tell you how much time that has saved us by anchoring our thread to the bobbin, because I'll guarantee you there's something about putting a travel kit in an airplane that when you get to the destination where you have a fly tying gig to do, all your bobbins will be unthreaded. Well, now we never have that problem anymore because the O-ring takes care of that for us. By the way, you get those at Ace Hardware. Go over in the hardware section, and even though that's not hardware, that's where you'll find them. A real handy thing to have. But anyway, I'm going to pull my thread out from under that O-ring now. You see, it just stays there until it's time for it to go to work. I'm going to start my thread base about 1/3 back from the hook eye. Going to wrap towards the hook bend about halfway and stop. One of the few flies that I tie that I do not put thread under the tail material or any material is a hackle fiber tail. Let me reach over here and grab these fibers. And I want you to notice that these fibers are, they're nice and spiky. And the key word in that last sentence was spiky, meaning that they're stiff and hard. And that means that they don't have a lot of flair to them. And that's why I tie them directly to the hook shank rather than, let me get rid of those, get these out here, rather than tying them to a thread base. Anyway, I'll measure it for length, and I want that tail to be about as long as the complete hook. Set it in place. And I want you to notice that I'm holding the material slightly above the hook. That's because I am going to move it down on my side of the vise like that. And then when the thread comes around and grabs it, the natural tendency, let me show you what happens. This is called thread torque. You see how it pushes that material away? Really frustrating. But if you put it down there and use that thread torque to your advantage, it will reposition the material from the side of the hook to the top of the hook, which is what it did right there. And I'll just wrap to the end of the shank and come back forward. Now I'm going to run my thread forward to the 1/3.
Why did you tie that on a bare hook?
Well, okay, the reason I tie that on a bare hook is because the thread base that you put on the hook has dimension. Not a lot, but it has a small amount of dimension. And what happens is when you put that hard material like squirrel tail or hackle fibers over the top of thread, it can easily slip off of that thread base right at the very end at the hook bend, and you'll end up with all your tails going downhill rather than sticking straight out like you want them to. And by the way, let's talk for a second about the fly tier's motto. Your job as a fly tire is to make your materials do what you want them to do and have fun while you're doing it. And unfortunately, too often, people will allow the materials to tell them what they're going to do. But that's, as you gain experience, you'll find that when you don't have to have the materials dictating to you any longer, you will have made it to at least the intermediate stage in your fly tying journey. Anyway, back to the vise. And I'm going to reach over here at the materials area and bring these two feathers back that I pulled out just a moment ago. And they're just straight off of the cape. Two feathers curved away from each other. In fact, they got three feathers. I didn't realize I only laid one of them out of the way. Okay, there we go. And what I need to do with these two feathers now is make a determination what part to throw away and what part to keep. Well, I want you to notice that the stem is pretty thick over here. But as I advance towards my left thumb, it gets thinner. Well, along about this area right here, the stem is just about the size that I want. I don't want too much stem in there, so I'll get right about here. And let's make sure that the other feather is about the same. Yep, it's about the same. So I'm going to pull these two out. I'm going to take one feather and place it so it's opposing the other feathers so that their natural curve is away from each other. And that's really important. Now let me trim off this waist right here. And I'll turn that around so those trimmed ends are facing my left because I'm a right-handed tyer. Now what we're going to do is pull these fibers back and turn them into a wing. See, this part will be the wing. This part right here is waist. It's not really waist, it's future flies. So, but let me make sure that my division between waist and wing is even. And it's not even right now. I think you can see that I've got more fibers on the swept back on the front and some on the back feather and all of that. So I'm going to use a bodkin. There we go. So now that I have an even division, top and bottom, you can see that that's a nice even division there. We're going to talk about how many fibers do you want to have in your wing. I want you to notice this piece of stem right here with the fibers that I'm sweeping back, that I worked so hard to get even on the top and the bottom. That piece of stem is equal to about 1/2 the length of the hook shank, maybe a little bit more. Never more than 2/3, because we want this to be looped. And if it's longer than that, we'll end up with a wing that could have the hackle stem very close to the hook shank or even touching the hook shank, becomes too stiff and it'll twist your leader while you're casting. Now I'm going to tie this on, and you want to have a wing that's about yay long, just like we're doing right there. But I'll guarantee you that thread torque that we were dealing with a few minutes ago is going to twist those fibers over each other, and the wing is just going to become a snarled mess. What I'm going to do is temporarily use the strength of the stem up here to control those fibers. So I'll tie those on very short, stem fibers and all, with snug but not tight wraps, 3 of them. Now I'm going to pull with my right hand and pull them out from under the turns of thread until they're the length that I want them to be, which will be the length of a size 12 hook. Now I'm going to pull them up, hold them in the pinch of my fingers, and tighten up. And let's get ready to trim off the waist here. All right, well, let's pull those wings up with a thread dam in front. And now what I'm going to do is pull those wings apart, trim off the waist, but don't lay the waist down. What I want is put that waist in the hackle pliers for future reference, meaning the next fly that we're going to tie, we'll already have our wings prepared for us. I want you to see that what the wings look like, though, as we start. Let me straighten out just a little bit there. One of the things, if these wings get twisted a little bit, that's why God gave you fingers, is to straighten all these materials out, get them around there where they're supposed to be. Now there's the wings the way we want them. Okay, so now let's go ahead and finish the fly. And I'm going to, if you haven't done touch dubbing before, you're going to learn something about it here in the next few minutes. And that is that you put a very, very light coat of dubbing wax. In this case, it's some that we manufacture ourselves, Beattys tacky wax. And remember, this dubbing that I'm using is it's a product that we make, but it can easily any of the muskrat, beaver, rabbit, any of those belly furs will work just fine. Now, what I do is I've got the sticky thread, and I'll just touch the dubbing bundle to the sticky thread. You see how it's grabbing that? I'll just give it a good little fluff in there. And here's an important thing about dubbing. You'll find that in our dubbing book if you look on our website, which, by the way, the website is at the upper left of the screen that you're looking at right now, btsflyfishing.com.
And that's a free download.
The dubbing book is not a free download. The humping book is a free download.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, one of the things that's really important about dubbing is that the direction that you twist. I'm a right-handed tyer, and I wrap up and over into the other side. That means if I'm standing in front of the hook looking at the hook eye, I am wrapping in a clockwise direction. I should therefore, when I'm standing on top of the hook shank looking down, I should twist my dubbing in a clockwise direction as well. And why is that? Because if you twist it in a counterclockwise direction, your dubbing comes loose. And how do I know about all this? Because for 40 years, I wrapped right-handed clockwise, and I twisted dubbing left-handed counterclockwise. And you know what? I would wrap my dubbing about 3 or 4 turns and then stop. It would be loose. I'd tighten it. So if you wrap, twist, wrap, there's a good chance that you might want to change the direction that you're twisting your dubbing. But anyway, let's get our body started and put in place here. I want you to notice that I'm keeping a fairly sparse application of dubbing on the hook. We're trying to represent a mayfly here, and the only mayflies that I've seen out there in nature that are even close to being semi-fat are the let's see, the Michigan. I can't think of it. Anyway, it's a big one up on the lakes in Michigan, and the other one is the green drake. And wherever the green drakes are, we have them all over the place here. In fact, they're getting ready to start right now on the Railroad Ranch on the Henry's Fork. And just tie that hackle down. Trim away the waist. I want you to notice that I crisscross that hackle, and you see what that hackle is doing? It's pointing in the direction it's going to go. I also want you to notice that I've got bare stem right there. Why is that? Because if you have hackle fibers tied right at the hook, when you pull your hackle around to start wrapping, you'll have fibers sticking back in the direction of the points of my scissors, pointing towards the back of the fly. Does it make any difference to the fish? Not a bit. All that is just one of those things about you keeping control of your materials. Now I'll wrap a few turns forward, a few back. I'll take one turn in front. And here's a trick that you may or may not know. A lot of times you'll end up with a space under your wing on the offside. If that happens, no problem. You just take another turn behind the wing and fill that gap. That happens more often with hair wings than this type of wing. But in this case, I don't have that problem, so I am not going to make another turn. I want to keep everything even. But with a hair wing fly, humpies, wolves, and stuff like that, you'll find that that happens very, very often. Now, I want you to notice that I've tied that feather off with 2 turns of thread. Here's an important function for us to talk about. We want to have a nice, delicate thread head on our fly. But we don't want it to come apart. Well, back in the day, I used to say to myself, Al, There's only 2 turns of thread holding that fly together right now. I better put some more on so it doesn't come apart. So I'll put on turn number 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Oh, 20 turns of thread will hold it. Then I cut off the feather and I said, oh, darn, I got to cover that up too. So then I cut the feather off, cover it up, and I end up with a really good looking fly and a big lopsided head. Let's see, we're back to 2 turns of thread right there. I'm going to show you a trick. To make nice, clean, neat heads, Gretchen and I call this dog-legging the hackle. We've already got the hackle anchored in the direction that I'm pointing with my scissors across the stem. What I'm going to do now is push the stem back between those wings and wrap a thread head and a jam knot that makes the stem bend and go back, the dog leg. You see how it kicks that back? That dog leg in the hackle makes it very difficult to pull out. Not impossible, but very difficult. And I'm going to do a whip finish, making sure I start back next to the hackle and make each turn, subsequent turn, closer to the hook eye. You don't want to start at the hook eye and go the other way. We'll talk about, if we have time later this evening, we'll talk about good whip finishes and bad. But for right now, we'll just talk about this fly that we just finished. I want you to notice that we have a nice looking head there with a dog-legged hackle. We don't have any fuzz, extra fibers or anything showing up in the head. Nice set of wings. I got a little fiber out of place on that wing right there. Now it's good. There we go. And now we just a drop of glue and your fly is done. And before we go any further, any questions? I see we have some people joining us off of the internet on Zoom. Welcome, Dutch. Welcome, Bruce, and welcome, Leslie. And all you Lubbock Fly Fishers. Any questions there at this point?
It's clear as mud for everybody.
What did you say? I couldn't make out what you said, so.
Did somebody say it's clear as mud?
Yes. Yeah,
Thanks a lot. Hey, at least it's Texas mud. It isn't Idaho mud, right?
Is there something about that wing that you didn't get that we could do over again?
Could you talk about the length that you use again?
The length of the feather that you use?
Yeah, when you formed that wing, how long you did it? Did you say 1/2 to 2/3?
1/2 to 2/3 of the hook shank.
Got it. I'll build another wing, and we'll do that as we do the parachute. And I'll slow down, and we'll emphasize that a little bit more. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we'll go into the parachute. Let me.
I can't tell you how many times we've been at shows and then we get a phone call and somebody says, how did you dress that wing back?
It's a question that we've been answering for a few years. Yeah.
This is going to be on YouTube. So you can go back and look if you forget what we did.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes a couple times watching that wing.
All right. I'm going to set this fly aside for right now. And we'll get another hook out. All right, start my thread base about 1/3 back from the hook eye. Couple of turns. I'm going to show you this time what happens if you put a thread base under hackle fiber tails. Okay, I'll wrap right to the end of the shank. There we go. Come forward just a little bit, and now I'm going to put on a make-believe tail here just for a moment. All right. What happens, no matter how much you think you're not doing it, is as you get back in this area here, the danger zone area between the hook point in the shank where you're having to do this routine and rock around, invariably your tension on the thread changes somewhat, especially when you're wrapping dubbing. And there's a turn, let's take it, there's a make-believe turn of dubbing right there. We tie the fly. It looks great. We put it in our fly box and we drive down a rough road on our way to the river. I'll guarantee about half the flies will have that happen to them as that last turn of thread with dubbing on it slips off of the base of thread under it. And your tails will be going downhill like that. Well, I don't want that to happen to my flies, so I don't put thread under the tail for it to slip off of. And let me just get rid of all this excess thread now that I don't need. All right. And I'll just get a few more fibers now for my tail. I want the tail to be about equal to the length of the complete hook, and it includes the bend. Remember, we keep the fibers slightly above the hook and then rock them down on the side of the hook next to us so that we can put a loose turn on, and then as we tighten, it rolls that material right up on top of the hook. If we try to tie it on top of the hook, invariably it will end up on the other side of the hook or even underneath the hook. Now it comes time to talk about the wing. Let me get some twists out of my dubbing, out of my thread there. All right, let's get our hackles here. Grab them. By the way, one of the cool things, and I want you to notice something about these two feathers. This feather on the back side right here, and this feather on the front side here, this one has fibers that are probably an eighth of an inch longer than these. The cool thing about Wonder Wings is you can put mismatched feathers together and make wings as long as the stem is about the same size. So you can use a lot of mismatched stuff to tie with. Now I'm going to sweep these fibers back. And I'm going to take my bodkin and make sure that it's evenly divided, top and bottom. All right, I had one wild one there that maybe you couldn't see it, but I could see it. Okay, you see those swept back fibers there? The length of the swept back fibers from here to here, that length of stem with fibers attached should be equal to about half the length of the hook shank, never more than 2/3. And if you'll look there, I'm kind of jittery here. I'm sorry, too much coffee, I guess, but you can see that that's just slightly more than 50%. I'll tie that on very short, using the strength of the stem temporarily, only temporarily, to help control those fibers so that thread torque doesn't twist them away from me and cause a mess. And I'm going to pull them out to length. And how long is length? Well, as long as a hook shank of the same size. And I've got a hook right there, and that looks like about the same size. I'll bind it in place. I want to talk to you about trimming waste. See how I'm holding those fibers up at about a 45-degree angle? You do not want to reach in and cut like this, a square cut. You can cover it up with dubbing, but I'll guarantee you that little bump that you leave in your underbody is going to show up as soon as the fly gets wet. The best way to get a nice smooth the best way to get a nice smooth fly is to start with smooth underbody. And we're going to get that by coming in from the other side of the hook, flat along the shank, so that we're making a very severely angled cut on those fibers. And I want you to notice now there's no bump there. I missed a couple of fibers. Let me get them right now. There we go. There's no bump. It's an even blending of the waist from the tail and the waist from the wing. Slightly bigger forward where there's more fibers out of the wing than there are fibers out of the tail, but you can see you get a nice even blend. All right, now we're coming, oh, that's right, we're doing the parachute now. Now, you're probably sitting there saying the same thing I did when I was first dreaming up how to do this. These fibers right here, how in the heck am I going to get them to hold up to a parachute hackle? There isn't any way in heck. In fact, for a long time, what I did is I would take a little tiny piece of wire and tie it on the hook and pull it up, and then I would pull the wings up and wrap the base of the wings around the little piece of wire. And that worked just fine, but it was a lot of extra work. But what I'm going to do is to show you a concept that Gretchen and I stumbled on. Oh, Jesus, probably 25 years ago or so. And we've been using it ever since. And we find that we use it 80% of the time on other stuff besides parachute wings.
Poly wings.
In fact, I'll show you something here in a minute. Just another trick, but right now, and that is we're going to borrow vernacular from our brothers and sisters in the construction industry. We're going to pour concrete, and then we're going to put rebar in that concrete while it's still wet. In fact, to strengthen these fibers so that they will support a parachute hackle with all the strength that's needed to really reef on that hackle while we wrap it. We're going to need 7 pieces of rebar and 4 applications of concrete. Now, I need to wrap up those wings. And an injury many years ago doesn't allow me to wrap up the wings. I can't raise my arm to do that. So I wrap up the wings by going down. So I can wrap up the wing, but I'm actually wrapping down because of the problem. Now, as I put tension on that thread, see how that just jumps out? So we have to put tension and then relax as we wrap our thread. So wrap under tension right to this point right here, stop. Relax both hands. Now grab the thread, the feather, and the thread, tension, relax. Tension, relax. Keep going. And what I'm doing now is I'm just pouring concrete around the base of those feathers. But boy, it'll slip in just a heartbeat if I get too crazy with the tension. Now I'm at the top of the area I call the wing post. I'm going to go from the top of that post straight to the hook shank. Okay, round and around and around, it's pouring concrete. Straight up and down is rebar. There's 2 pours of concrete, 2 strands of rebar. It's already very sturdy already, but I'm going to make it real sturdy before we're done here. That's number 3. Okay, I've got 3 strands of rebar, 3 applications of concrete. We're going to put in 4 more strands of rebar right now. How do we do that? We're going to crisscross between those wings, and there's 1 in front, 1 in back. 1 in back, 1 in front. So that's 2 in front, 2 in back. That looks just the way I want it. Now, I'm going to trim off the waist. Remember, it's not waist, it's the next fly. Put it in my hackle pliers for future reference. And now it's time to finish the fly. So let's just get some dubbing going here. Remember, I'm twisting clockwise. I wrap clockwise. I twist clockwise. If I'm a left-handed tire, then I'm going to probably want to twist counterclockwise, working my way forward. Okay, now it's time to tie on my hackle. Now, I often see people tie their hackle on and say, oh, darn, they'll take the dubbing off of the thread, tie on the hackle, and then put dubbing back on the thread. Well, the thread's still there. So we're not going to worry. We're just going to dub the front of the body while we tie on the hackle. Do two things at once. I want you to notice, though, that I stripped off quite a bit of stem there. That's because I want bare stem to go all the way to the top of my wing post and maybe even a little further. And in fact, you'll see here in a moment, that stem actually is a piece of rebar. It doesn't know it, but it's going to be rebar. And we'll just start dubbing our way forward. Trim off the waist. And I see a lot of people stop right here and they'll finish off their parachute at the hook eye. Gretchen and I don't do that. Too often, you'll be on the river after tying, especially the really small parachutes, and tying them off at the eye, that you're getting another hook out to clear out the hook eye because you've got some stray hackle fibers in the eye of the hook because you tied off at the hook eye. We're going to tie off somewhere else, which means we need a little bit more dubbing on our thread. So I'm dub up to the front there, and I'm going to dub back now to the wing post, making certain that my last turn is behind the post. Now I'm going to get ready to wrap back up. Remember, we've got 4 strands of rebar hanging in the breeze rat, yet they were the crisscross wraps. And I'm going to pull the hackle up for a 5th one, and I'm just going to wrap another application of concrete. Okay, now look at that. I can just pull against that's nothing but thread and hackle fibers, and I am really kind of reefing on it pretty hard. I want you to notice, though, now we're back to how we're going to tie the fly off. We're going to tie it off at the post rather than at the hook eye. And my thread is hanging behind the post. First turn at the top of the post, and then each subsequent turn closer to the body as I work my way down. And I'll take a turn, follow that hackle around, anchor it in place. And let me see if I can show you how this works here. Okay, I've got one turn anchoring that hackle in place. What I'm going to do now is lift that hackle now and go under it with 2 turns, really binding it into place. Trim off the waist. And I'll set that, I'll set that feather down for a bit. And I'll finish the fly with a half hitch tool, and I'll do a half hitch and a whip finish, both. Let's see, can they see that? Yeah.
Okay. You want to go to the far side?
Pardon me? Okay. Anyway, I'm going to put a half hitch on. Whoops, I missed it. Trying to go slow so you can see it. Pull that half hitch in there. And the difference between a half hitch and a whip finish with this tool is how many turns you place on it. Oh, and here's a trick. Come back to the us camera. Okay. The thread doesn't want to slide on my half hitch tool very good. That's why God gave me a nose, is to grease it up. I don't, okay, if it grosses you out, don't look. Okay, well, now back to the vise. Because okay, we'll set that down. Trim off the waist. I got one fiber here that didn't want to get with the program. I'll get rid of that. Another fiber on this side didn't want to get with the program. But other than that, it looks like we've got a pretty clean looking parachute. And why would I want a divided wing parachute? I mean, what difference does it make? Well, quite frankly, it doesn't make any difference unless you're fishing in a spring creek kind of environment. I guided a lot in the Paradise Valley in Montana. And in places, the Yellowstone River is just actually, just a few yards up and over the bank from the Yellowstone to Depew Spring Creek is the one I'm thinking about. Well, it's not uncommon when you're in the Spring Creek guiding clients. Water is slow. You have lots of times to see the bugs hatch. And the way a bug hatches in those spring creeks is this blob comes up to the surface and it floats along and it starts to unfold and then its wings come apart like that as it goes down the river. When those wings come together, it's gone. When they're like that, it's crippled. Now, that's just one guy's belief of having watched it happen time and time and time again, guiding on the spring creeks. When you're on the Yellowstone River, it makes no difference. Use a poly wing post. It'll be just fine because the water is a totally different kind of environment. It's not a real slow environment, not like the spring creeks. Water's not quite as clear, it's a lot faster. Spring creeks are slow, clear. The fish are pretty educated. They come up and look and say, George, I don't think I want to bite that. It looks like Al tied that and he didn't put enough turns of thread on it. And back down to the bottom of the river he goes. I'm being facetious, but you kind of get the idea I'm talking about. They look them over pretty close.
Well, on the Yellowstone too, we fish the scum line a lot. You really can't see it a lot.
Yep. But anyway, let me get side by side here so that we can do a question and answer period before we go back and talk about that. Before we go back and talk about the concrete and rebar and another place that you can use it. But anyway, any questions?
Yeah, we've got one. What did he do?
This is one about if it would be okay to whip finish around the post.
I'm sorry, I can't hear him.
He was asking if you could whip finish around the post as opposed to doing the half hitches and whip finish over the eye.
Absolutely, we do it all the time. Yeah, absolutely. And another good way to do it when we start tying sizes 20 and smaller, we actually put a little drop of crazy glue on the thread and just take 2 more wraps and cut it off. So there's no knot on them. We tie off everything at the wing post. For the very reason I don't particularly like standing in the water with another hook trying to clear the eye of the hook that I'm trying to put on my tippet.
And so you tie these down to size 20?
These I tie down to 20s. When I go with less than 20, I don't normally do the Wonder Wing. It's there's another wing that I use that I'll give you a general idea of what the wing, and then we can talk a little bit more about that concrete and rebar, if that's all right with you.
By the way, show them where we put the glue when the head cement. We drop the head cement at the top of that.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. Okay, when we glue this fly, first off, we set it at about that angle right there. And I'm not going to get any glue out right now, but we drop the glue not at the hook eye, but right there in the
top of the wing post.
In the top of the wing. And then what we do is we pull the fly out and tilt it down like that. Count to 3, tilt it back. Okay, drop of glue, 1, 2, 3, tilt it back. If you go 4, 5, 6, 7, it will travel forward on that piece of thread from here to here. It'll glue the eye shut. But if you go 1, 2, 3, it won't glue the eye shut. And don't ask. It took a long time to figure that out. Anyway, we were going to show you I'm going to do just a wing, and I'll show you a couple of other things that I promised. First off,
Hal, I have a question before you go on to that next part. On the parachute, what are your thoughts about whether the parachute hackle should be wrapped with the top side of the feather up or the top side of the feather down?
you mean concave up or down?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I like them facing down. I've had a lot of people tell me their reasons for wanting it facing up. I like it facing down because the dimension of the hook places that well, if it's, well, let's get back to that real quick here. Let's see, where is my parachute? There it is. Why don't you go back to that vise there? I'll set that hook down, that one in here. Okay. In theory, the hook sets on the water, and that places the parachute slightly above. If the fibers are curved upward because we wrapped it with the concave side pointing up, then it's the fly is going to have to tip a little bit in the water for those fibers to come in contact. When they tilt down, they seem to make a better footprint to me. Now, there's somebody, I guarantee you there's somebody out there that will refute what I'm saying in that regard and have a very good argument for it. But again, your job as a fly tyer is to make the materials do what you want them to do. And if you want them to face up, make them do that.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions before I give you another demonstration? A couple of two demonstrations on places to use the concrete and rebar, and also a good whip and a bad whip. I've never done this before. This will be the first time I've ever done it right now. But I have confidence in the concrete and rebar process so much that I'm just going to take a chance. Now, I could fall flat on my face, and there's probably some of you out there saying, oh, yeah, is he going to fall on his face? Yep. Well, before I fall on my face, let me at least get a pair of glasses on that I can see better, so at least I can see the concrete coming if I fall on my face. All right. Gretchen, you've got some peacock laying over there, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I need 2 strands of peacock. And I'm using peacock, but it could be anything. One of the things that if you want to do a parachute and you're tying with CDC, it's kind of a problem because that CDC doesn't support the hackle any better than the hackle fibers do. Well, same way, concrete and rebar. Well, I'm going to tie a couple of wings out of this peacock. All right, let's just go ahead and wrap us a wing post. Remember, we're putting in concrete. And now we're putting in the rebar. Concrete pour the other way. Putting in the rebar. And I'm not going to crisscross between these wings. So I'm just going to put on a couple more applications of concrete and rebar. All right, now let's get a hackle here, and I'll just wrap a parachute hackle real quick. And remember, the stem itself is also a piece of rebar. All right. And now we're just going to go ahead and wrap our hackle. And who said you can't wrap hackle on a peacock herl? You can. And I'll do the same thing as before, except we're not tying a fly right now, so I'll just go ahead and do the whip finish. Boy, it's a good thing I greased that tool up because it's working really good right now. Okay, now let's find one more hook here. And I wanted to show you about the good whip and the bad whip. And I'm going to switch to some single strand floss for this demonstration, just because the extra dimension will make it show up a little bit better. Okay, imagine, if you will, that application of thread ended right there at the hook eye. By the way, that's the hook eye right there, not up here. Forget it. We're just doing a demonstration. I see an awful lot of people tie their flies so that they end up at the hook eye when everything's done and it's time to put a whip finish. And they start at the hook eye and wrapping each subsequent turn further back on the hook rather than each turn slightly forward. Here's what happens. We're at the hook eye. Next turn a little bit further back towards the wing. Back towards the wing, further back. I want you to see what happens. We have the 5 turns protecting the movable turn that I'm pulling on right now. And in theory, it's supposed to disappear under the 5 turns and protect it. Look what happens. It lays across the top before it goes under the turns. Now our thread is already positioned at the back here. So I am going to put on a whip finish that starts at the back and works forward to the hook eye. Okay. Each turn, subsequent turn is closer to the hook eye. Now I want you to notice, see if I can get this turn here so you can see it. Everything disappears under all 5 turns. I've got a whip finish there that isn't going to, it doesn't have a weak spot because of one single strand leaning across the top. And again, let's get set up here for some questions.
I was just going to have you mention the ebooks that you have. I have the Wonder Wing book that I'm going to be using to show examples after we get off the Zoom.
Thank you. You were a mind reader because I was actually going to go to this slide right here. We have a few books for sale on our website, and that's how we can afford to bring free presentations to people like you, is because we have, if you find what we have to offer of interest, we got a book on just about every subject we can talk about. And in fact, I want to bring to notice the 2 books in the lower right corner is one on making candy. They're both on making candy. One is peanut brittle, and the other one is, what's the other one?
English toffee.
English toffee, yes. And I'm going to give away just one secret on the English toffee. She puts just a hint, I mean, a minute hint of jalapeno in it. It gives it just a spark of flavor. It intensifies the flavor. It's not enough there to make it hot, just intensifies the flavor. So you have to be judicious with the application of jalapeno. But anyway, that goes into a lot of our candy. Anyway, we have subjects on just about everything under the sun. In the upper left corner, you see one called the Humpy Encyclopedia. Yes, you can pay $21 or whatever the heck it is on Amazon and get a paperback version. But that's the one freebie we have on our website, btsflyfishing.com. You go to that book and you'll find a word within the description that says link, and that allows you to download a free ebook version of it. But that's it for now, unless...
So are all the books, do they have the option of an ebook or a printed book?
All of them except the Humpy Encyclopedia. The ebook is a freebie, so you don't have to pay for it. All the rest of them have ebooks, and that's just an option. When you check out at Amazon, you can get the paper version or the ebook version. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us. And for now, that's a wrap. Enjoy your fishing this summer.